Jam Vishnupad Paramamsa Paravajakacharya. Also to our Shishaman is divine grace. A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Siko Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda. Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Radha Krishna Gop Govindanath Syam Kund Radha Kund Giri Gauran Ki Jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Navadip Mayapur Dham Ki Jai. Sri Jamuna Maya Ganga Maya Bhakti Devi Tulsi Devi Ki Jai. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Gaur Pramananda Haribo. All glories to some devotees. All glories to some devotees. All glories to some devotees. Jai Sri Guru and Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 10, Text 41. Bhagavatam is the answer to all questions. Sattvam, Rajas, Tama, Iti, Tisra, Sura, Nri, Naraka, Tatrapi, Ekaikasho, Rajan, Vidyante, Gatayas, Trida, Yadait Kai Kataro, Nyabhyam, Swa, Baba, Upahanyate, Satvarajastamaiti, Tisra Sura Nrinaraka, Tatrapi Ekaikaso Rajan, Vidyante Gatayastrida, Yadai Kai Kantaro Nyabhyam, Swabhava Upahanyate, Sattvam Rajastamayiti, Tisra Sura Nrinaraka, Tatraipi Ekaikaso Rajan, Vidyante Gatayastrira, Yadai Kai Kataro Nabhyam, Swabhava Upahanyate, Sattvam Rajastamayiti, Tisra Sura Nrinaraka, Tatrapi Ekaikaso Rajan, Vidyante Gatayastrida, Yadai Kai Kataro Nyabhyam, Swabhava Upahanyate, Sattvam Rajastamayiti, Tatrapi Ekaikaso Rajan, Astida, Upahanyate, Sattvam Rajastamayiti, Sura Nrinaraka, Kaikatyataronyabhyam Mataji's. Sattvam raja tama iti Sura Ninarakaha Tatrapi ekaikaso rajan Yadaikaikataro nyabhyam Swabhava upahanyate Sattvam rajastamaiti Sasura ninaraka Tapyekaikaso rajan Tekati astrida Kataronyabhyam Bhava upahanyate. Sattvam, the mode of goodness. Raja, the mode of passion. Tama, the mode of darkness. Iti, thus. Tisra, the three. Sura, demigod. Nri, human being. Naraka, one who is suffering hellish conditions. Tatra api, given there. Ekaikaso, another. Rajan, O king. Vidyante, divide into. Gataya, movements. Trida, three. Yada, at that time. Ekaikantara, one in relation with another. Anyabhyam, from the other. Swabhava, habit. Upahanyate, develops. Translation. According to the different modes of material nature, the mode of goodness, the mode of passion, the mode of darkness, there are different living creatures who are known as demigods, human beings, and hellish living entities. O king, even a particular mode of nature, being mixed with the other two, is divided into three, and thus each kind of living creature is influenced by the other modes and acquires its habits also. Purport. The living entities individually are being conducted by a particular mode of nature, but at the same time there is every chance of their being influenced by the other two. Generally, all conditioned souls in the material engagement are influenced by the mode of passion, because every one of them is trying to lord it over the material nature to fulfill his individual desire. But in spite of the individual mode of passion, there is always the chance of being influenced by the other modes of nature by association. If one is in good association, he can develop the mode of goodness, and if in bad association, he may develop the mode of darkness or ignorance. Nothing is stereotyped. One can change this habit by good or bad association, and one has to become intelligent enough to discriminate between good and bad. The best association is the service of devotees of the Lord, and by that association one can become the highest qualified man by the grace of the Lord's pure devotees. As we have already seen in the life of Srila Narada Muni, He became the topmost devotee of the Lord simply by the association of pure devotees of the Lord. By birth, he was the son of a maidservant and had no knowledge of his father and no academic education, even of the lowest status. But simply by associating with the devotees and by eating the remnants of their foodstuff, he gradually developed the transcendental qualities of the devotees. By such association, his taste for chanting and hearing the transcendental glories of the Lord became prominent, and because the glories of the Lord are non-different from the Lord, he got direct association from the Lord by means of sound representation. Similarly, there is the life of a Jamil, 6th canto, who was the son of a Brahmin and was educated and trained properly in the discharge of the duties of a Brahmana, but who, in spite of all this, because he contacted the bad association of a prostitute, was put into the path of the lowest quality of Chandala, or the last position for a human being. Therefore, the Bhagavatam always recommends the association of the Mahat, or the Great Soul, for opening the gate of salvation. To associate with persons engaged in lording it over the material world means to enter in the darkest region of hell. One should always try to raise himself by the association of the Great Soul. That is the way of perfection of life. Sattvam rajastama iti tisra sura nirnarakaha tatrapi ekaikaso rajan vidyante gati astrida yatai kai kataro nyabhyam swabhadra upahanyate. According to the different modes of material nature, the mode of goodness, the mode of passion, and the mode of darkness, there are different living creatures who are known as demigods, human beings, and hellish living entities. O king, even a particular mode of nature, being mixed with the other two, is divided into three, and thus each kind of living creature is influenced by the other modes and acquires its habits also. Om Jnanataminandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chaksurun Militam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namah. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, and my spiritual master opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances unto his lotus feet. So here we get the picture that we are a habit of our association. Unlike what was said the other day, that we see people that were associating with Srila Prabhupada had some difficulty. Actually, those who associated with Srila Prabhupada had no difficulty until they were faced with association with the modes of material nature. And then one has to be intelligent, this verse states, to make the proper choice. Mahat sevam dwaram ahur vimuktas tamo dwaram yositam sangi sangam mahantas te samachita prasanta vimanyava surida sadhavoye. Mahat sevam, by serving the Mahatmas, the great souls, Mahat sevam dwaram, the door to liberation, ahur vimuktas, that is opened up. Tamo dwaram, and the door to the hellish world, Yosita Sanghi Sangam, is open when one associates with the modes of material nature, especially the mode of passion and ignorance. So, there are stories mentioned here. The story of Narada Muni. Even though he was born as the son of a maidservant, because somehow or other she was living with the Mahats, Mahatsevam Dwara Mahur Vimuktas, the saintly people. He got the great opportunity of eating their remnants and hearing their discussions, Krishna Katha. And by that association, he became purified to the point of being Narada Muni, the great devotee of the Lord. It also mentions in the purport the story of Ajamil. Ajamil was born a Brahmin. His parents were Brahmins. And he was following tapasa brahmacharjena samena cha dhamena cha tyagena satya sochabhyam yamena niyamena va. He was engaged tapasa brahmacharjena. He had a chaste wife. Samena cha dhamena cha, controlling the mind, controlling the senses. Tyagena, being renounced. Satya, being truthful. Sochabhyam, being very clean. Tyagena satya sochabhyam. Yamena niyamena va. And always chanting. But one day, when he was going out in service of his father, his parents, to get some flowers and herbs in the garden, he saw this prostitute and lowly man engaging in sense gratification. Couldn't get it out of his mind. I remember I was doing Sankirtan some years ago in Port Authority in New York City, very low place. And one lady came up to us, myself and another Sankirtan devotee, Pragosh. And she said, "Would you like a date this afternoon?" It was at the end of our day. And Pragosh looked at his watch. You've heard this? He said, 6 o'clock I have to shower. 6:30 is Sundar Arti. At 7 we're going to be having Bhagavad Gita class. And at 7:45 we have hot milk and Krishna book reading. She was completely bewildered. She said, "So does that mean you don't want a date?" And he was, "I'm kind of busy. I got to get back to the temple." She was completely bewildered. One has the choice. You have the association of saintly people. Do you want to give that up for the association of lowlifes, lowly people. Ajamil did such a thing. Ultimately, he gave up his wife, chaste wife, and brought in this lady to be their maidservant. And ultimately he married her and had 10 children with her by the time he was 80. Can you imagine? He's still having just 70, 75, 77. The youngest of that children was his son Narayan. He was very fond of Narayan. Narayan was just a young boy, but Ajamil, everything that Narayan would do, he would be so amazed with. This is the Vedic culture. You name your children Krishna conscious names. Names from the Shastra. My children are, Sita was born on Ramnami, so her name is Sita Priya. And Ramnami was born during the Nishinga prayers across the street, and his name is Ramnami. So throughout their life, still, Sita, go do this. Ram, make sure that the car is moved. Sita, take out the laundry. Always chanting the names of Sita and Ram. This was a Jamil. He was always chanting the name of Narayana, the 4 syllables. Even though he wasn't thinking of Krishna. I'm certainly not thinking of Sita and Ram when I call them. He wasn't thinking of Narayan. But at the time of his death, or what seemed to be his death, he yelled out in total anxiety, Narayan. Because the child was nearby and he was thinking of the child. But because he said the name in total anxiety, completely surrendered to the 4 syllables, Narayana. When the Yamadutas came and tried to take him away, as soon as he had chanted Narayan, the Vishnu Dutas appeared. And the Vishnu Dutas said, you can't take him. He is chanting the name of God, even though it's his son, and therefore you cannot take any devotee of the Lord. Yamadutas were very upset. They asked the Vishnu Dutas, where do you get this information? And the Vishnu Dutas told him, Dharmam tu sakshat bhagavat praniyatam. Real religious principles are enacted by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Dharmam tu sakshat bhagavat praniyatam. Navai vidur rishiyanapi deva. That the principles of spirituality are enacted by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, you can never touch the devotees of the Lord who are chanting. So Srila Prabhupada also describes that at the time of death, it's very difficult to think of Krishna and to chant Krishna. Even one's been chanting their whole life. It says at the time of death, the bodily airs which go in a, what is that called? A clockwise fashion, immediately go in the other fashion, the airs. And the body fills up with fluids, edema, the lungs, all the body. And it's very difficult to focus the mind. But if one is fortunate enough that somehow or other, by the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one can chant Krishna Krishna, Narayana, Sita Ram at the time of death, Radha Krishna. Then one can be promoted to the spiritual world. Otherwise, we don't know. I was in a car crash with Untitled Prabhu a few years back. We were going from St. Louis to Chicago. Ice all over the road, middle of winter. And the car went off the road into a ditch, but spun around a few times to give us a whirl. And we were screaming. Nakama hit his head on the mirror and was bleeding. I was just completely bewildered. And we were screaming, oh, I can't mention in the front of the deities or in the association of devotees, but oh Kaka, something of that sort. And when we were in the ditch and had come to a stop, we were both very upset because we had actually chanted that together like a kirtan. Both of us chanted simultaneously. And not to offend Naikatma Prabhu, wherever he is, but we were so upset that by that time we had been in the movement for 20 years or so, 25 years. And when we were in a precarious situation, we didn't yell out, "Oh Krishna, oh Radha, oh Lord, help me." We yelled out something that would, if we had died, we would have gone to the planet of Kaka. So we realized we have to work on this meditation. Ajamil did such a thing. When the Vishnu Dutas gave him a chance, he went to Hardwar. He left his family, finally, and he practiced chanting and transcendental Krishna conscious meditation and preparing for his real death, which when it happened, he was taken away by the Vishnu Dutas this time. Yamadutas didn't even come to bother him. So this verse proclaims Mahat Sevam Dwaram Ahur Vimuktas Tamo Dwaram Yositam Sangi Sangam. If one serves the Mahatma, the great devotee of the Lord, Srila Prabhupada, one is opening the door, Mahat Sevam Dwaram Ahur Vimuktas, to liberation. But if we go on to Modwaram Yositam Sangi Sangam, if we go on serving our senses and engaging in sense gratification, gross and subtle, to Modwaram, the door to hellish life is open. You give up, you make the choice to give up the association of Krishna conscious persons. No question, you become influenced by the modes of material nature. And at that time, I believe the Yamadutas can come. Of course, any devotee, the Yamadutas don't come, but if one gives up being a devotee. So therefore, we should be very careful that we see the Vishnu Dutas at the time of death. This is our purpose in life, is to finish this life in a spiritual fashion. So, this is the story of a Jamil who was ultimately saved by the Vishnu Dutas and became a great devotee of the Lord again. And by engaging in this way, in the association of the saintly persons, one can be guaranteed of his safe, her safe engagement in spirituality. All glories to Sri Guru and Gauranga.